looking at this article, and it states the volume of homes in Canada for 2023 will be 14.6 million. That's 14.6 million properties. And those properties are all paying taxes. And those properties are all under the obligation to apply for permits and license. And those properties are all public stores. 14.6 million public stores on top of permits and license. Here the article reads, taxes consume more than 45% of household income for average Canadian family. 45% of the income is being taken away based upon the principle of mutual benefit. The federal enactment, the federal statutory power, designated the Financial Administration Act, charges for rights and privileges. The governor in council may, on the recommendation of the Treasury Board. So we're about to read a law. We're about to read a statutory operation of law. And here it says it's the Treasury Board that recommends this operation of law. Well, who is this Treasury Board that's about to recommend this statutory law? That I'm going to tell you that's not a good law, and we're going to see in a minute. But who is this Treasury Board? The Financial Administration Act, Article 5.1, and they haven't updated this enactment yet. It states there is hereby established a committee of the King's Privy Council for Canada called the Treasury Board. All right, so what is the Treasury Board? Well, it's the King's Privy Council, over which the President of the Treasury Board, appointed by commission under the Great Seal, shall preside. The Treasury Board shall, in addition to the President of the Treasury Board, consist of the Minister and 4 other members of the King's Privy Council. So the Treasury Board, right, is the King's Privy Council. And now the King's Privy Council protects the interest of the King. And now they're about to recommend some operations of law in Canada for the King. The Privy Council for Canada is a group of prominent individuals appointed for life by the Governor General. The appointments are made as a matter of convention on the advice of the Prime Minister. The Privy Council is tasked with aiding the reigning monarch, and thus the Governor General, by providing advice on significant issues. So we know that the Governor General, right, is exercising the executive power of the King, according to the Constitution Act 1867, Article 10. And then in Article 11 it states, there shall be a council to aid and advise in the government of Canada, to be styled the King's Privy Council for Canada. So the Governor General is exercising the King's power as Chief Executive Officer of Canada, and the Privy Council is there to aid and advise the government of Canada on behalf of the King, for the better of the monarch. All right, so back to the original law that we were reading. The Governor in Council. Well, who's that? The Governor General. And what position does he operate from? Well, he's operating the executive powers of the King. He's operating on behalf of the King and on the recommendation of the Treasury Board. Well, who's that? The Privy Council. And what's the Privy Council operating as? Well, in the benefit and the interest of the King. So 2 parties here who operate on behalf of the King are about to recommend some statutory law. By regulation, prescribe the fees or charges to be paid for a right or privilege. Welcome to Canada. Welcome to the truth of Canada. You want to exercise a right? You want to exercise a privilege? Well, you're going to be paid for it. You're going to be charged for it. Conferred by or on behalf of His Majesty in right of Canada, by means of a license, permit, or other authorization, by the men or women, no, right? By the persons or classes of persons on whom the right or privilege is conferred. Or authorize the appropriate minister to prescribe by order those fees or charges. So those prominent individuals, right, who are part of the Privy Council and the Governor General has put into operation a law that says by regulation. So what's a regulation? Well, a regulation operates in the execution of a power conferred by or under the authority of enactment. It's just a way of saying a rule of statutory law. Now, a regulation includes a bylaw. So there you go, right? The municipality. You've broken our bylaw. Our bylaw requires. We have bylaws that says. Or instrument issued. That's the authority of an enactment, an act of parliament. So by regulation, prescribe the fees or charges to be paid for a right. Paying for a right or privilege conferred by or on behalf of His Majesty. Or authorize the appropriate minister to prescribe by order those fees or charges by means of a license, permit, or other authorization. All right, so if they're saying in the law, right, that you got to pay for the right, you got to pay for the privilege, and once you pay, you'll be given a license or a permit or some type of operation to do the act that you want to do. Well, if they can charge you and require that you get a license or permit to do the actions, then the actions by themselves must be by nature lawful. Because they're not going to say, well, you got to pay a fee for a right or a privilege that is fundamentally unlawful. Now notice the subject in law, the player in law. It states by the persons or classes of persons on whom the right or privilege is conferred. So let's look at driving. You want to drive, right? Well, you're a class of person in the law. You're a driver. And if you want to get a license to drive, you got to pay the fees or charges on behalf of His Majesty, to His Majesty. And they create statutory law that says you must pay these fees in order to get a license, in order to be able to drive. So if you want to go hunting or fishing, it's the Minister of Natural Resources that will issue you your permit to the class of person. And what's the class of person in their law? Well, for fishing, right, it's a sport fisherman. And for hunting, it's a hunter. So you apply for a permit as a class of person and you pay for a right that you already lawfully possess as a man or a woman. The municipality where you've been incorporated into, well, they're going to ask you for permits for construction and permits for animals and all sorts of other types of permits. Why? Because they're using the original authority that was brought forth in the Financial Administration Act through that statutory law that was subsequently transferred into other enactments and allowed ministers and allowed government agents to charge for a right or privilege that would be conferred upon the classes of persons. Every operation of law where you are required to get a license or permit is flowing down from the chain of authority, from the Privy Council and from the Governor General, who have put these operations of law into effect in order to preserve and protect the right of the king. Every capacity that requires a license or permit is always going to be statutory. You're the owner of a corporation. You went to the Business and Corporations branch and you opened up a business and you got a license. You got a permit from them and you paid for it. Why? Well, because you were a statutory creature and you were seeking a right and they gave you the right once you paid for it. And just so you know, you may think you own the corporation by yourself or with a group of individuals, but in law, you're a subsidiary of the Corporation of Canada. That's why they have the right to regulate you and control you and send inspectors to your property, to your corporate body, and demand that you conform to what they tell you to do. Hey, the statutory creature, designated plumber, or electrician, same thing applies, right? You have to get a permit, you have to get a license, you have to pay a fee. The law says you have to pay a fee or a charge for the right or privilege, and then it will be conferred by or on behalf of His Majesty. So who's giving you the right? Who's conferring the right upon you? The government of Canada? The Prime Minister of Canada? The Minister of the Department? No, it's His Majesty that is conferring the right upon you. I would like to put a garage attached to my house. It's my fundamental right if I want to put a garage there. But no, wait, we don't recognize that right. Why? Well, because you're a resident in a residence of the municipality and you're our officer. And therefore, we have a bylaw that says, as that statutory creature, if you want to put the garage up, you need to follow the bylaw and get a license and a permit. So come to us and pay us the amount of money and follow our rules. Then we will confer the right upon you. But we're not conferring the right upon you. The King is conferring the right upon you. He just allowed us to exercise this on His behalf. The Financial Administration Enactment said so. It said that they could authorize the appropriate minister to prescribe by orders those fees or charges. Fees or charges for what? Well, for the right or the privilege to be conferred upon the person on behalf of His Majesty. Not on behalf of the local government, not on behalf of the minister, but on behalf of His Majesty. So right from the top of the chain of authority, we have nobody that's dealing with the interest of the people of Canada. The Governor in Council is operating as the executive power of the King in Canada. He's operating on behalf of the King. And the Treasury Board is the Privy Council, operating on behalf of the King to protect the King's interest. And basically, what they're telling you through the statutory power is this. If you want to do something, if you want to take some actions that are lawfully yours to take as a man or a woman, well, we're not going to allow you to do it. We're going to change your designation in the law, and we're going to make you pay for the right and pay for the privilege. And then the King will confer it upon you, and you'll be allowed to do it. I don't need the King to confer nothing upon me. I don't recognize his authority. His past generation of family members must have been schizophrenic because they claim that God told them they have the right to rule. And that is garbage. Nothing but garbage. Now, just saying that, right, it doesn't free me from the bondage of the servitude of the law that they created through their statutory powers, as I'm showing and sharing with you in other videos. But it's just to let you know what's going on. This is the wonderful power and the operations of law that they are creating through statutory law to limit and abridge our rights. This is what the wonderful government of Canada is really doing to you. If you're listening from a mobile device, don't forget to subscribe from your mobile device and then turn on notifications, or YouTube won't tell you when I upload a video.